بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله حي على السلام حي على السلام حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله وجزينا خير نبيك محمد المصطفى المختار أحمد يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي كان موجودا قبل حدوث الأشياء ويبقى بعد فناء الأشياء تفرد بالأولية والقدم وبسم كل شيء ما عداه بالفناء والعدم كما قال عز شأن كل شيء خالق إلا وجهه وكل نفس ذائقة الموت وقال كل من عليها فان ويبقى لوجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام سبحان من لا يخفى عليه اختلاف النيات ولا يحزب عنه مآسي العباد في الخلوات سبحان الله الذي منه خلقة العباد وإليه المعاد ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يراه ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يراه نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو الملك الذي لا ينازع في ملكه ولا يضاد في حكمه يعظم من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء ويرحم من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء تعذيبه المسيئين عدل وعفو تفضل ونشهد أن محمدا سيد المرسلين وخير المبشرين والمنذرين صلى الله عليه وآله الهداة المهديين من ركب سفينته نجا واهتدى ومن تخلف عنها ضل فغرق وهو أوصيكم عباد الله بالاعتصام بالتقوى فإنه حبل متين وأروة الوثقى فقال أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب عليه الصلاة والسلام من خطبة له وتشمل على تهذيب الفقراء بالزهد وتعذيب الأغنياء بالشفقة أما بعد فإن الأمر ينزل من السماء إلى الأرض كقطرات المطر صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I begin by advising myself and all of you to adopt the taqwa of Allah as is the best of provision. The khutbah that I chose for today's discussion, in line with the continuous celebration on this very auspicious occasion where we are celebrating the birth of Imam al-Muttaqeen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I chose a sermon from Nahj al-Balagha. In the past 2 nights, we, alhamdulillah, had Jashan giving respect to Imam alayhi salatu wassalam, and you heard a great deal of fadail, which of course cannot be encompassed in merely 2 nights. So many fadail of Amir al-Mu'mineen that are still unknown to mankind. And if they were told to mankind, and if they became aware of those fadail, it'll be, for some people, it will be very difficult to digest. And for that particular reason, Rasulullah had mentioned that that Ali, I refrain from mentioning many of your fadail for the reason similar to how people dealt with Isa ibn Maryam. I will refrain from mentioning those fadail because then people will start treating you like Isa ibn Maryam. Now, of course, people treated Isa ibn Maryam as how? Considering him to be son of God for some of the things that he was capable of doing, which Quran also highlights that Hazrat Isa was able to give cure to many disease, even bring dead back to life again. So these things are associated with Allah. Now, of course, every time he did it with the izn and the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, people thought, no, this was his personal act and he was independently doing this, and therefore they called him to be, part of God and son of God. So Rasulullah said, I fear the same, that people will say the similar things about you, O Ali. Therefore, I will refrain from mentioning many of your fadail. With all the fadail that exist of Imam Ali, which people still have a hard time believing, just imagine if those fadail which Rasulullah did not mention about Amir al-Mu'mineen, what would it would have done to those who still have difficulty understanding Imam Ali. Now, with that said, even the fear that Rasulullah had, you always hear about this firqa, which is called Nusayri, right? Which still went ahead and did what Rasulullah was fearing to. That had I mentioned those fadail, majority would have become Nusayri. The fact that he refrained from mentioning those fadail is still, you got this group that emerged, which we denounce absolutely has nothing to do with the madhab of Islam and madhab of Tashayyu, went ahead and adopted this aqidah. With that said, 2 nights, you heard about a great deal of fadail. I'm sure because the programs are held online, you have a variety of options available, not just locally, but even from across the states or other parts of the United States, or even internationally. A lot of these mahafil, maqasida, and a lot of these jashan that are taking place, majority of them are taking place online. So you have this good opportunity to benefit from those places which you've never heard before, for example, which is indeed is a good thing. While there's a downside of it, but this is a good thing that you're able to hear from other parts of the world. So today, for this Jumah Khutbah, I thought it would be appropriate to touch base with Nahj al-Balagha, which is a masterpiece associated, of course, as being the kalam of Ali ibn Abi Talib والسلام, compiled by Syed Rizwan. And to the extent that it is authentic, Syed Rizwan did not even bother to mention the references of these khutbahs or the references to these letters, because it was so known, and that the fact that he didn't even have to mention. But of course, people have done tahqiq and research in this section, and they have established the references and established the authenticity, which was some people were disputing. So I chose this khutbah number 23. It is about keeping aloof from envy and good behavior towards your kins, your family members. And it also includes tahdhibul fuqara biz-zuhd, that how those who are poor, they still should be able to embellish themselves with what? With asceticism, and with ta'adibul aghniya bi-shafaqa. And at the same time, those who are aghniya, those who are affluent, how Imam alayhi salatu wasalam does ta'deeb. Ta'deeb means gives them adab, teaches them a lesson, an adab for them, something that they would take heed from. So Imam begins by saying, Amma ba'd fa innal amra yanzilu min as-samai ila al-ardi ka qatarat al-matr. Look at the analogy that Imam is giving. He says, now then, verily divine orders descend from heaven to earth like drops of rain. So how you see the drops of rain come down? This could mean one or two things. That means the way it rains on earth, when the raindrops come, of course, nobody has the ability to count all the drops. You may be able to count how much millimeters of rain it had fallen and how much, gallons of water or whatever measurement is there for water that was accumulated, but nobody can really go ahead and count how many drops fell. So one thing is that it is beyond human understanding to go ahead and count the drops that come down. So Imam says, divine orders descend from heaven to earth like drops of rain. That's one thing, that it is abundant. Number one, because rain is abundant, so divine orders are abundant. Number two, you know how when it rains, not do any prejudice toward any land. It rains equally to all places, right? Does it do prejudice? No, I'm not going to rain over here. I'm going to only rain over here. For example, if it's raining in our area, yeah, rain depends on the desert area. That's another story. But I'm saying, well, for example, if it's going to rain here in New Jersey, it's not going to see that, okay, I'll only rain on the highways and I'll refrain from raining, for example, the agricultural fields. No, rain takes place and happens everywhere indiscriminately. So the divine doctrine also comes down, descends like this drop of rain, and is delivered in this thorough manner that there isn't any khiyanat or any mistakes in it. Let's just put it that way. Then Imam says, bringing to everyone what is destined for him, whether plenty or paucity. This is where the point Imam is bringing our attention to. When he gives the example of rain and the qatarat of the world, drops of rain and whatnot, what's the point that Imam is trying to make? He gets to this. He says, إِلَى كُلِّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا قُسِمَ لَهَا مِنْ زِيَادَةٍ أَوْ نُقْصَانٍ. That bringing to everyone what is destined for him, whether plenty or paucity. So, if any one of you observes for his brother plenty of progeny or of wealth or of self, it should not be a worry for him. So first we establish the fact that when it rains equally to everyone. It's not going to be depriving anyone. But when these divine doctrine descends in haqq of each individual, few people that are sitting over here, few others who are listening online, all of us individually, if we're thinking, that we're all recipient of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But all of us are receiving the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala differently. Some are getting more and some are getting less. There's plenty in some, there's paucity in some. Some are getting more children and some are getting none. Some are getting more wealth and some are getting none. Some are getting increment in their own selves and some are getting none. He says, when you establish the fact that everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you should not worry. It should not be a worry for him. When you see this differentiation between people receiving less or more, it should not be a matter of worry. But what is the reality? The reality is a great matter of worry to us. Forget about people outside within my family. If I see someone is more fluent than me, has been bestowed with other things that I have been deprived of right away, this envy gets to me. This hasad gets to me. This jealousy gets to me. And that ruins the relationships. Imam makes a point toward the end of the khutbah. I don't know if I'll be able to get to it or not, because some of these things are not self-explanatory, so I have to go in further details. Makes the point that you can't live without these family members, the kins and the kith. You can't live without them. Therefore, destroying your relationship over these matters is not worth it. So take heed. So long as a Muslim فَإِنَّ الْمَرْعَى الْمُسْلِمَ مَا لَمْ يَغْشَى دَنَاءَةً تَظْهَرُ فَيَخْشَعَ لَهَا. He says, so long as a Muslim does not commit such an act that if it is disclosed, he has to bend his eyes in shame. You do something. What does a hasad do? You recite that in Surah Nas, right? قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور من الجن والناس, or قل أعوذ بالفلق rather. قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد. While Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us that we should seek refuge from what? From the beginning, we should read قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب. These categories, and then hasidin is hasad. It's a very difficult category to put in between. You know, you sometimes see a lineup, you say, wow, to be in such a company. And then to be in such degraded company. Hasid, basic the philosophy is, hasad is something by which a person does not say, Allah, give it to me. He has it, I should have it too. Hasid says, Allah, take it away from him. I don't have it, he shouldn't have it either. She shouldn't have it either. So that's what hasad does. So Imam says, so long as a Muslim does not commit such an act that if it is disclosed, he has to bend his eyes in shame. You end up doing something in this hasad, in this paucity that you have not been given enough, deprived, you end up committing an act. You think nobody will see it. You know how strong Allah's power and the might is that if you want to hide something, the more you try to hide, the more it becomes apparent. Remind you of the story of Zulaykha and Yusuf, alayhi salatu wasalam. Zulaykha made sure, وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ. In Arabic, you can say, أَغْلَقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ. أَغْلَقَ also means to close. Ghallaqa also means to close. Comes from taghliq, which means gradually closed. When you do something gradually, that means there were many doors that were closed by her. 7, as the riwayat mentions. وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ. She closed all these doors. She kept it a secret. Didn't want anyone to find out. But what happened? Every human being knows about this story because it's in Quran. And they'll continue to mention the story. Why? The Quran will remain till the end, forever. So the more you try to hide something, keep it a secret, it is a chance that it'll become. And once it does become apparent to people, will you feel ashamed? That should be the measure. So if I'm doing an act today, whether out of displeasure, envy, prejudice, jealousy, think about it, that if this action was disclosed to 2 people whom I'm respected in front of, how would they feel about it? Because we're not thinking about Allah right now. Because fearing Allah should have been an enough factor of us to refrain from it, but we're not thinking of that in that line. Just think that those 2 people who respect you, if they found out this action was yours, how would you feel? You heard about today, there's a Olympic coach who committed a suicide because he was involved in some indecent activities. Way back in 2012, he actually helped US win gymnastic Olympics. And then now today he was found shot dead. And so he committed self-inflicted shot to himself and he killed him. The shame of people finding out of the crimes that he perpetrated. So sometimes that also leads to a disaster. So think about it before you go ahead and do something like this, that what would people do? Because a lot of times say, well, we should always think that what would Allah think? We're forgetting Allah right now. Because if we feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way we should fear, then we'll never do anything wrong. But we don't have that fear, unfortunately. So just think how people will react to your wrongdoings. And then he says, Imam continues by saying, that so long as the Muslim does not commit such an act that if it was disclosed, he has to bend his eyes in shame, and by which low people will be emboldened. So it has 2 effects. First, you feel ashamed, and then those who are lowly, those who are already disgraced, those who are already on the bottom, they will be emboldened. They will get an opportunity to go ahead and do the same thing. They will become, you embolden people by doing certain things. For example, a person of my, stature that I have in this community, if I'm, for example, the imam of this masjid, if I do an action, people look up to me, for example, especially the younger ones, children. And if they see me do something, that is what a stamp of approval. Maulana did it. Maulana was hanging out over there. Maulana was doing that. Maulana was doing that. So if Maulana can do it, that is a stamp of approval. Parents will be like, okay, fine. If Maulana was with you and if he was doing it, then of course, how can we challenge him? So that becomes a stamp of approval. So if I go ahead and do something which will embolden the youngsters to go ahead and do it, there's always going to be nuqsan and loss in that. Similarly, the Muslim who is free from dishonesty expects one of the two things. Either call from Allah, the one who has nothing to blame for. He doesn't feel any fear. There's no khiyanat upon him. There's no blame upon him. He's free of all of those things. He expects what? Either call from Allah, and in that case, whatever is with Allah is the best for him. Whatever little or a lot comes, it is best for him. And or the livelihood from Allah. He has already children and property with his faith and respects are with him. So this is where Amir al-Mu'mineen takes a turn when he speaks about our personal dealings with people when it comes to being envy or jealous. Then he goes to ta'adibul aghniya. Then he goes ahead and gives a lesson to those who are affluent. Oh people, and I'll just read the translation because I won't have time to go into the details. Oh people, surely no one, even though he may be rich, can do without kinsmen. This is the point that was being trying to establish earlier. You cut off these relations based on your jealousy and envy. And then Imam turns. He said, oh people, surely no one, even if they may be rich, can do without his kinsmen. You cannot live without him. They're going to remain part of your life. A lone person with much wealth, but without any family to share with, without any friends to, be along with, this person, you'll hardly find such an individual who enjoys this sort of loneliness and to establish such an empire and not have anyone else to share with. It says there will always be something missing in such an individual. So Imam is hitting where some of our minds don't go. He says, oh people, surely no one, even though he may be rich, can do without his kinsmen and their support by hands or by their tongues. Even if you become marja taqlid, you become a president, you become a king, you still need these kinsmen to be along with you and the value of their support by their hands and by their tongues. They alone are his support from rear and can ward off from his troubles. And they are the most kind to him when tribulations fall. Others will be criticizing you. When problems come to you, others will be the first one to criticize you. But the family members, the kins, they are the ones who always side with you. They'll be the ones who will support you. Syed Razi goes on explaining some of the words that Amir al-Mu'mineen has used in this khutbah. He says, if any one of you finds your near ones in want or starvation, he should not desist from helping them. That will not increase if this help was extended, that will decrease from him, nor decrease by thus spending it. Whoever holds up his hand from helping his kinsman, he holds only one hand. But at the time of his need, many hands remain held up from helping him. One who is sweet-tempered can retain the love of his people for good. A lot of time what happens, what Imam is trying to tell us over here, is that when you refrain from helping someone, because you're thinking that this will not come upon you ever again. That means this sort of situation, you will never be facing this sort of situation. Always think that tomorrow could be your turn and you might be facing a similar situation. If at that moment, since you didn't help anyone out today, what if you raise your hand? And how are you going to be able to stand up and ask for help when you today decline helping others? If today you decline helping your family members, and tomorrow you are in need, you'll be the first one ashamed of asking for any help. So make sure that you raise your hand, go help out when you can. And when tomorrow, God forbid, if you are ever in need, others will not desist, will not stay back of helping you. So I thought this khutbah was very, very relevant when it comes to our social lives, that how Imam ﷺ is touching about some of the behaviors that we have when it comes to our family members and ourselves, and what it is that he has when it comes to someone who's going through struggles and poverty, or someone who's at the level of affluency. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq that are able to act upon these beautiful words of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Of course, I didn't do justice to the words of Imam. For more information, you can go and read this khutbah from Nahj al-Balagha number 23, sermon number 23, which is a very short sermon, not a lengthy sermon by any means. Study, read, and you'll get more benefit from the commentaries that is done. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our waiting Imam and make us amongst the helpers and soldiers of Imam. Inna hasan hadith wa ablagh al-mawidha kitab Allah wa billahi min shaitan rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa al-asr inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا اله الا هو الحليم الكريم غافر الذنب وقابل التوب وهو الغفور الرحيم سبحان من سبقت رحمته وذبح وبسط اليدين بالرحمه سبحان من لم يكلف نفسا الا دون وسعها وعن السيئات ولم يجاز بها سبحان من لا يزداد ولا معاصي لبعد الا كرما وجودا ولا كف الذنوب الا هو وصف نشهد ان لا اله الا هو لا تغفل لبعد بجود ولا بعد المسلمين بحلمه ونشهد ان محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المظلمين بعثه رحمه للعالمين صلى الله عليه وآله لقد أمركم الله في محكم كتاب بالصلاة على نبيه وحبيبه فقال تعليما لكم وتشريفا للصفي إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وعلى إمام المسلمين وقائد الغر المحجلين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى سيدتنا نساء العالمين وبذات خاتم النبيين سيدتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلوات الله عليه وعلى الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد وكربلاء وعلي بن حسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاة والسلام. اللهم صل على مولانا صاحب الزمان ما هي آثار البدء والطغيان هذه أبنية الشرك والنفاق عاصد فروع البغي والشقاق صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آبائه الكرام اتصلت الليالي والأيام. اللهم عجل فرجا وسهل مخرجا واكحل ناظرنا بنظرة منا إليه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه وتفضل على أمراء المؤمنين بمزيد التوفيقات وازدياد الإقبال والولوف بالدرجات. اللهم افعل بنا ما أنت أحله ولا تفعل بنا ما نحن أحله بجاه محمد وآله المعصومين صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يذكر فتنفعه الذكر ان الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون.